In many ways, our world is a cruel world. Almost everywhere we look, there's cruelty of some kind. Slaughter of people, there's torture of people, there's brutality of many kinds. And it's been that way. Any even casual look at history, you find it over and over and over again. People being brutalized, even children, infants being killed. Many of the armies have gone through countries and raped the women and murdered the women. And there's more of it today, probably, than we know about, that we see or understand. That's just one. Physical cruelty. There's financial cruelty. People in power squeezing people without power, squeezing them financially, taking advantage of them. And of course, there's verbal cruelty. Recently, I heard a neighbor just really tear into another neighbor with vile language and brutal language and irrational language. And then there's relational cruelty of abuse. Abuse is rampant. It's in marriages, mostly men, but not only men. Sometimes it's abuse of their wives, sometimes it's abuse of their children. Where did it all come from? How did it all start? Well, we know the first brute was Cain, who killed his brother Abel, and then it's gone on from then. But Jesus wasn't that way. He was firm and could be direct. He was accepting of people. It was one of his obvious character qualities, this thing of acceptance. And if we're going to be like Jesus, we need to develop that character quality of acceptance. It is sadly lacking character quality in our world today in many situations, but it's needed. The opposite of it is rejection. Rejection is much more common. It's on every hand, and anywhere we want to look, we can see where one person is rejecting one, or a group of people is rejecting another group. So we're faced with decisions. Will I accept this person? Or will I reject him or her? What is my level of acceptance? Do I have a high level of acceptance, or do I have a low level of acceptance, or really maybe not much at all? Do I accept often, or do I accept sometimes? Do I accept people on most occasions, or do I reject people on most occasions? I want us to explore that topic this time as we think about character qualities, and specifically character qualities that Jesus demonstrated. And I want to do it in four ways. First of all, let's look at Jesus and see that he accepted people. There are many examples in Scripture. Let me give you a few. In Matthew 9:10, it says Jesus was having dinner. Yeah, he actually did that. Like us, he had dinner. Probably most days he had dinner. He was at a man by the name of Matthew. It was at Matthew's house. And you may be aware that just prior to this, he had called Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector sitting in the tax booth. Jesus walked by that tax booth one day and said, "Follow me." And I think it's amazing. Matthew could have heard some things before. Maybe he even had a conversation with Jesus before. But it tells us he got up, left the tax booth, and followed Jesus. So if the chronology is close in Matthew chapter 9, just right after that, he had a supper. And he invited Jesus and Jesus' disciples. They came and had supper. And it says that many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. And included in that group of people were Pharisees. I don't know whether they were the same as sinners or not, although that's what Matthew's writing about. But they come to Jesus' disciples and want to know why Jesus is spending his time with a lower class of people. And Jesus heard it, and he said to them, the sick don't need healing. It's the healthy don't need healing. Excuse me. They don't need a doctor. It's the sick people that need the doctor. And then he went on to say, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I didn't come to call the righteous, but sinners. So he came to this earth to call sinners. That's how accepting he was of people. Go on a couple chapters to Matthew 11, verse 19, and John the Baptist's disciples come to Jesus. John's out preaching and baptizing in the wilderness, and his disciples come, obviously sent by John the Baptist, and they want to know if Jesus is the Messiah. And they want to know also why he's meeting with these people. And he said, John the Baptist came neither eating or drinking, and they called him demonized. They said he had a demon. He said, the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say he's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. That's recorded again also in Luke chapter 7. Even non-followers observed that Jesus was a friend of collectors, tax collectors, and sinners. And then in Luke chapter 15 and verse 1, it says that tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear him. They were listening to Jesus as he spoke, as he taught, as he preached. If ever someone could have rationally put up barriers, it was Jesus when he was being surrounded by these kind of people. If ever someone could just simply walk away from a situation like that, it could have been Jesus. But he didn't. He didn't because he accepted people. We called them to change, but he accepted them. There's a difference between calling people to change and rejecting them. But perhaps the classic statement about Jesus and his acceptance is Matthew 26:50, when he's in the garden and Judas comes to betray him, brings the soldiers and other people, and Jesus speaks to Judas and he said, friend, come do what you're here to do. He called him a friend. After what Judas was doing, Jesus still called him a friend. So that's just a few snapshots of the life of Jesus. But if we look at Jesus' life, we'll find that he accepted people. There are many other examples of that we find in the Gospels. So I've been talking about acceptance, but maybe we should back up a step and look at it in another way and say, we need to understand what acceptance is. The word means in this connection to receive with favor. I'll say that again, to receive with favor. We receive the other person, and we do it in a good way. It's to take the person to ourselves. Another definition is to take to oneself. And it's to let people have access to one's heart. Take into friendship and companionship. That's acceptance. Someone else has said it's to receive a person for what they are and to be open and responsive to them, regardless of their frailties, regardless of their weaknesses, regardless of their flaws. We open our hearts to them. And that's the way Jesus was. He opened his heart to people. Let them come into his circle. And of course, that's the whole teaching of Scripture. For example, in Romans chapter 14 and verse 1, says, accept him whose faith is weak. That's right, being written to Christians in Rome and written about their behavior. They are to accept even people who are weak, even when their faith is weak. They may be poor Christians. They may not have a lot of good qualities, good character qualities. And so that is saying that as believers, we're to be open to all believers, even those with obvious weaknesses and deformities. And it goes on to say that we're to do it without passing judgment. Let's use another phrase for it, without criticizing and fault finding that person. Rejection almost always has criticism and fault finding built into it. In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 1, it says, if you see a brother overtaken in a sin, you go to them and you restore them, you speak to them. Then a couple of things are added. He says, do it gently. That's an example of acceptance, and we do it gently. Rejection quite often has a roughness to us. It's not a gentleness, it's a roughness. Then it says, watch yourself, because you may sin sometime. And we all know, yeah, probably before the day's out. It would be good if someone challenged me. No condemnation, no condemning someone that God accepts. I think it's what it's saying here. For God has accepted him. Paul goes on to write there in Galatians chapter 6. God has accepted him. Don't you reject him. God has accepted him. What a different world we would live in. What different churches we would worship in if this was always true. That we accepted all of the people that God has accepted. And we opened our hearts to them and responded to them and didn't reject them. We can also say that it's an eagerness to forgive. Come alongside when a person is wrong or has blown it or is down, and we lift them up. We don't criticize them. We don't condemn them. We forgive them. And we could also say we refuse to gossip about it. We refuse to tell other people what we have seen in that person's life, what we have worked with when they're there. And this has so much to do with our thinking. It all originates in our thinking. What do we think about the other person? What do we think about ourselves? Thirdly, I would like us to think about the opposite of acceptance. And we've already referred to it, but let's look at it some other ways. It's a refusal to be open. Accepting the definition is to be open. The opposite is refusal to be open. Refusal to be friendly. We may walk past that person. We may turn and walk another direction if we're about to meet that person. We need to be friendly to people if we have the character quality of acceptance. And we need to be interested in people. If you study human interaction much, there are some people who, when they get into a conversation, use it to talk about themselves almost exclusively. And they can go on, and sometimes it goes way out. They talk about their third cousin's best friend, and you never even knew the third cousin or the first cousin. But the person with acceptance is someone who is interested in the other person and they talk to them and they ask them questions. It's not a platform for them to talk about themselves. That's all tied into what acceptance is. It's to pursue a friendship, pursue a relationship. Acceptance means that we will pursue, not everybody, of course, because we have limits, but we will have it as a habit of pursuing a friendship. And there's good results from it. Somewhere along the line, I read a quotation. I tried to find it, but I haven't been able to find it. Someone said, I have yet to meet the man who couldn't teach me something. That's one of the benefits of acceptance. We meet people who can teach us things, and we learn from people because we're interested in them, we're friendly to them, we talk to them, we listen to them, get them to share their lives with us. There are reasons for rejection. We all know that. But let's think about them. Why do we refuse to be open? It may be our own weakness. We may see something of ourselves in the other person. When we see that in the other person, then it makes us uncomfortable, and we want to cut them off. We want to stay distant from them. So sometimes it's our own weakness that causes us to be rejecting people. Sometimes it's inadequacy. Maybe we have never been trained, never been helped, maybe never been encouraged to see how important acceptance is. And then maybe we have been rejected. Maybe somewhere in life we have experienced rejection. Sometimes we're rejected by parents. I know a situation where the husband didn't want children, and a baby boy was born to them, and he would have nothing to do with that baby for months. And I know the story well enough to know that that boy in his early 20s now has had a very, very tough life. Part of it was, at least, was the rejection of the father of the son. Maybe we've been rejected by a leader, and maybe it's real rejection. Maybe it's just imagined rejection. A lot of it is imagined rejection. We think we're being rejected when we're really not. But sometimes we are. When we're rejected by leaders, then we find it difficult to accept others. Tied into it all, though, and a big part of it is the rejection of God's love. People do reject God's love. Paul wrote to the Corinthians, if our gospel is veiled, it's veiled to those who don't believe. Paul knew some people wouldn't believe. He doesn't give us any indication of how many would and how many wouldn't, but he knew some people wouldn't believe. They would reject the good news of God's love. And rejecting other people may come out of this, that there's a rejection of God and his love. Sometimes we make up excuses for it, and we say, well, I'm not worthy of God's love, or how could he ever love me? And of course he's not worthy. None of us are worthy. That's the whole concept of grace. God calls us even in our unworthiness. Let's go to the fourth point, and that is crucial, what it takes to develop this whole character quality of acceptance. Let me give you some suggestions. One is we deal with the results of rejection. If we have feelings of unworthiness, if we have feelings of inferiority, if we have struggles with depression, that's someone has said is an internal temper tantrum, then we need to deal with it. I'm not talking about neurological depression. I'm talking about emotional depression. Deal with it. And we have to deal with subjectivity. Very often, when we reject people, when we fail to accept them, we have lapsed over into subjectivity, and we're imagining things, thinking things, and we need to deal with that. So deal with the results of rejection, whatever they are in our lives. Secondly, be aware that there are limits. We're not called to accept sin. We're not called to be mushy and make compromises with truth and righteousness. We're not called to that. But we have to realize that there are limits. There are some places I wouldn't go. Do I reject the people? In a sense, yes, because they are involved in things that I will not be involved in. And then we also need to take some definite mental steps. Recognize rejection for what it is. In your mind, in our minds, recognize it. If we're adults, we stop blaming our background, stop blaming someone else. If we're Christians, stop blaming the circumstances. Stop saying, God, this is too hard. And then we need to put the desires of the sinful nature to death. Titus chapter 2 says, the grace of God which brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, or the desires of the sinful nature, we should live righteously, soberly, and godly in this present age. What are some of the desires of the sinful nature? One is to feel superior. We don't accept people because we feel superior to them. It's easier to reject them because that puts them beneath us, and we practice a lot of one-upmanship. Secondly, we can go the other way and we can be inferior, feel inferior, not be inferior, feel inferior. We can fail to reach out to a person because we think we're inferior to them. There are many reasons for rejecting instead of accepting people. Basically and ultimately, it's all selfishness. We're selfish. We don't want to expend something. We don't want to make ourselves vulnerable to something, and so we reject. This carries over into every aspect of life. I think it's seen a lot in marriage. A couple gets married, and of course the goal is to help each other grow spiritually or mentally, emotionally. But it never happens if one or both of them don't have acceptance. If we get married saying to ourselves, well, I'll change him or I'll change her, what we're saying is I have a mentality of rejection. They have to meet my standard. And when there is acceptance, then we can help each other grow. We need to remember the cross. God bought us. He bought us with a horrendous price. Suffering and death of Jesus. And because he bought us, God accepts us. One of the great biblical teachings is the teaching of justification. We're justified by faith. We're justified by the blood of Jesus. To be justified means to be declared no longer guilty but righteous. declaration. It's a judicial term. We're declared no longer guilty, but righteous. And when we're justified, there's just a whole line of amazing things that happen. One, we have peace with God, being justified by faith. We have peace with God. We have righteousness. We're declared righteous in Jesus. He gives us his righteousness, puts it on our account. We're pardoned. Our sin is pardoned. Our crimes are pardoned. There's forgiveness. There's cleansing. There's acceptance. There's sonship. We become the sons and daughters of God. There's citizenship. We become citizens of a new country. Our citizenship is above, not on earth. And on it goes. All that happens. So when we reject someone, we need to remember that we've been bought, we've been redeemed by a great price, and God accepts us. If God accepts me, I should accept others. I'm accepted in Jesus, not because I'm worthy, not because of what I've achieved, but because I'm in Jesus. And I want to improve because I love him. He loved me first, and I want to return that love. And loving Jesus means that I accept people as he accepts people. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing, the thing of acceptance. I confess that I've forgot to write out some discussion questions, but let me see if I can give you a couple at least. One would be, how grateful am I that I'm accepted in Jesus? What do I do to express that gratitude? Number two would be, are there times of rejection in my life that I need to go back and reclaim for God? And what are those times of rejection? Number three, who are the people that I find easiest to accept? And am I willing to become that kind of a person? And number four, who are the people that I find easiest to reject? And why do I reject them? And number five would be, in what specific ways does God want to bring healing into my life in the whole area of diminishing rejection and increasing acceptance? Thank you.